heavenly blessings that he may receive. Ah, you are here, moving in our midst. I worship you.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's session. Can you please confirm you can hear me?
Working in this
Yes,
place.
I hear you.
I can hear you from
Everyone
here.
hear me?
Good evening. Yes, I can hear you. Good evening.
Good evening. Yeah. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's session. We're happy to have you here today. Our session today will be focusing on labor relations, international and Nigerian labor laws masterclass. We're starting right about now, but if you haven't yet invited your friends, your colleagues, your group members, your buddies, please send them the link right away because we are starting now. And the session will be recorded, and so we can share with people after the session. But please send to your colleagues and your friends so that they can join in right about now. Promises to be an engaging and insightful session. Our focus tonight will be labor relations, international and Nigerian labor laws. That's what we will be doing tonight. And just to briefly introduce who we are as a community, we are the Covenant Nation, a faith-based Pentecostal church seeking to help people develop their career in HR and engage actively within the HR community in Nigeria. The whole essence of the group is to ensure that we arm people with the right information to enable them go and deliver change in the world where they find themselves. And we welcome everyone this evening with our arms wide open to support everyone to grow and develop in their careers. And so you're welcome to join us in our community, in our church, whenever we have our meetings, and we'll be sharing information about all of our sessions regularly. Nevertheless, please do not feel pressure to attend. As you know, some of the sessions are recorded and we'll share that after. But if you do have the time, please make sure that you attend these sessions. This is a cross section of our members and some of our members in the community. You can see everyone is smiling and happy. It's a really lovely community out here. So we are excited to have you here this evening and looking forward to have an exciting time with us this evening. So we've said that this is an engaging and insightful session. So with us this evening, we've got a power-packed HR professional in our midst. He's a top-performing, accomplished, and skilled human resource executive and researcher with over 15 years plus of experience across high-profile industries, including the power, oil and gas, telecommunications, broadcasting, real estate, advertising, academia, consulting, and volunteer work. Oluyemi Adeosun offers professional expertise and a diverse range of skills within the organizational strategy development, business strategy, change management, employee relationship management, and administrative experts HR roles. Oluyemi Adeosun is a member of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management. You can see certifications, MCIPM, SPHRI, GPHR, HRPL. He's a PhD candidate with in the economics department of the University of Lagos. That's still ongoing. He's got an MBA from the Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, an MSc in economics from the University of Lagos, a BSc in economics from the University of Lagos. Currently, he's the head of employee relations at Ikeja Electric. And over the course of his career, he's been the head of HR and administration in Korea Plus Limited. He's been the people manager for Russell Smith Integrated Oil Services. He's been the head human resource technology distributions limited, head shared services Philco Limited, head human resources in motion of advertising. He also has experience in consulting, HR experience as Globacom, a major telecommunications firm, as we all know in Nigeria. He's a member of Toastmasters International, and he has attained the highest award of Distinguished Toastmasters International. He's also a Division F Director-elect 2020-2021. Yemi Adeosun has published 11 papers in reputable journals and 2 book chapter contributions. With Jesus' joy, good people, let us welcome our speaker tonight, Yemi Adeosun. Thank you for running this session tonight, and we're looking forward to an exciting session. Please, over to you, Yemi Adeosun.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that exciting introduction. Good evening, everyone, and happy Easter. I know it is not easy to pull out of family, friends, and loved ones for a learning session, but we have to do what we have to do. Thank you for voluntarily joining this session. So let's go right into it. Okay, we'll be looking at the labor law. My colleague who had introduced me earlier will share the labor law again. She had earlier shared it on the group, but please, if as much as possible, if you have not already downloaded it, please download it maybe on your phone, your system, whatever device you are connecting with, because it will be very, very helpful. Okay, so some of our core learning objectives today include the global perspective and basis for employee and labor relations. We'll also define and explain employment relationship. We will discuss the role of the state in industrial relations system. We'll also look at the concept of labor laws, the Nigerian Labor and Allied Act, and then 1 or 2 other things around this place. But on a general note, there is a popular saying that says that ignorance is not an excuse. Ignorance is not an excuse. So whether you are aware or not aware, you cannot use that as a reason or as a justification for doing the wrong thing or not doing the right thing. So the onus lies on you to ensure that you are knowledgeable. And these things are not static, they are dynamic, they change from time to time. And so you have to be functionally aware, contextually aware. And one of the things understanding the labor law does is that it helps to bridge harmony in the workplace. There's something we call industrial harmony. Okay, industrial harmony. Okpemipo, you may want to send that message to everyone and not just only me. Thank you so much, Okpemipo. Okay, so let's make progress. Now I'm going to lay a foundation, and if I had my way, I would have laid this foundation at the end, because I want as many people that will join this call eventually to hear this. But it is a foundation, so I have to say it from the very onset, from the beginning. And I congratulate you for being here with us right now. So I need us to get 1 or 2 things clearly, so that going forward in our HR practitioner role, or even as professionals, we will know the authority, the source of our strength, okay, the source of our conviction and our commitment. No employer or boss, in quotes, so to speak, will just toss you around like the wind. You know where we are coming from. So, you see, HR practice, we hear things like global best practice, international best practice. We also hear things like best fit, and so on and so forth. All these things are good. However, it is not just the big multinationals, the big corporations that define or shape best practice. There are institutions, and one of these institutions that helps to shape, refine best practice is the ILO. ILO. What does ILO mean? ILO means International Labor Organization. International Labor Organization. Just for your information and for the benefit of everyone on this call, International Labor Organization, permit me to use this phrase, is a parastatal or a subset of the United Nations. So the United Nations is an umbrella body of about 200 or more countries around the world that puts various frameworks in place. So you will hear things like, oh, the United Nations Human Rights Commission. That's an organ of the United Nations. United Nations Human Rights Commission. You will also hear United Nations Children Fund, UNICEF. That is also an organ of the United Nations. However, for the space of labor, human resources, we have an organ called ILO, International Labour Organization. So as aspiring professionals, as we grow in our career, we have to touch base with the ILO so that you understand the fundamentals. Now, they have said a lot of things, okay? And from time to time, they release communique, but I'm just giving you an abridged version today, a synopsis. Now, when it comes to the 4 key issues that they have, put forward to us, 4 key things in their meeting in 1998, okay, they came together, and when I say they, I mean all their member countries sent in delegates. Typically, when ILO is doing conventions, they have 2 or 3 sets of delegates. They have delegates from labor, the workers' union, okay? They also have delegates from the government of the member organizations. Then they all equally have delegates from the employers' association or forum. So there are 3 people or institutions involved now: the federal government of Nigeria, the labor unions in Nigeria, and the Association of Employers in Nigeria. These 3 people or 3 bodies will represent the delegate from Nigeria. So let's say 6 people go from Nigeria. It can be 2 from government, 2 from the labor union, 2 from the employers. So in Nigeria, they call a body NECA, Nigerian Employers Consultative Association. That's the member association. Okay, I can see Nebeti Okoye raising up his hand. Do you want to say something? Or it is unintentional? Okay. So when you see this, so I'm just explaining this so that you know how these conversations take place and how these decisions are reached. They are reached after painstaking engagement, consultation, interaction, rigorous discussions, and then they come up with what we call maybe a communique, a resolution. You know, they can use any nomenclature as it is. Now, 4 critical things are very germane, very fundamental. The first one is the right of workers to associate freely and bargain collectively. I'll say that again. The right of workers to associate freely and bargain collectively. In other words, to form union or to unionize. I know I'm getting to someone right now. So if you are ever in HR and you are saying, no, we don't want union in this place, you are against a core cardinal principle of the ILO, which is against international best practice. The second key one, I know everybody on this call will agree with this: the end of forced and compulsory labor. The end of forced and compulsory labor. The third one, the end of child labor. The end of child labor. The fourth one is the end of unfair discrimination among workers. Okay, so let me say 1 or 2 things around this place, and then we progress, we move on. Now, when we talk about child labor, as HR professionals, I need you to know that it's not enough that your own organization is not involved in child labor. Also, the organizations that render services to you, that are vendors to you, that provide you raw materials, your organization must also ensure that they are not using child labor so that they can produce goods and services at a cheap and then ensure transfer cost savings to you. Are you together? Are we together? So it's not just your organization. So maybe you are working with procurement. You must find out, I hope the organizations that we are doing business with are not engaged or involved in the use of forced and compulsory labor or of child labor. Now, the last point, I'll just say one or two things. And if I stop here, one or two people will have gotten insight. Now, when we talk about discrimination among workers, even let's just take something as simple as an average job vacancy. You will see discrimination there. You will see something like only men should apply, only women should apply, people above a certain age should apply, people below a certain age, and people of a certain tribe. All these are what? Signs and elements of discrimination. So if you are working in line with the ILO, you will not do a job vacancy and you'll be putting things like age, gender, things that don't do the work. It's not a skill, it's not a competence, okay, that will get the work done. The end of unfair discrimination among workers. Now, why have I mentioned these four things? Why have I mentioned this organization? Is to also let you know that when it comes to individual countries like Nigeria and their constitution, and also the legislation like the labor law, they don't just get it from the air. They don't just get it arbitrarily. They get insights and feedback and input from this central organization. Because why should 400 people from 200 countries in the world take the pay to iterate and come up with a brilliant package, and then your own National Assembly will ignore it? It doesn't make robust or complete sense. You'll be missing out. Now, you may not adopt everything, but a lot of it you will be able to adopt. Some you need to modify, some you will need to contextualize or modify, maybe based on your culture, your religion, and the predominant political setting that pervades that community. Now, still speaking about global standard, I also want to use another global standard. Okay, so there's something we call Social Accountability International. It was formerly called Council on Economic Priorities. Okay, Council on Economic Priorities. And is an auditable certification that encourages organizations to develop, maintain, and apply socially, acceptable practices. Now, they came up with a list of 8 or 7 key performance criteria for them to be able to certify any organization. Now, because of time, I'll just mention them in brief. You also see an overlap between the SA 8000 and the ILO declarations. You see some synchronization there. The first thing they say, no to child labor. So that is a no-brainer. 2, no to forced and compulsory labor. 3, you must take the health and safety, HSC, health and safety of your workers very seriously. 4, you must support the freedom of association and the right to collective bargaining. You can see unionism coming up again. 5, no to any type of discrimination. And list of discrimination can include race, nationality, religion, disability, gender, sexual orientation, union membership, political opinions, age. No to any type of discrimination. Now, I will add 1 or 2 more points here, also from SA 8000. Now, they now say that, and this is also very important to everybody on this call, that when we are having our disciplinary processes, when we are putting our disciplinary procedures together, we must treat all personnel with dignity and respect. We must have zero tolerance for corporal punishment, mental or physical abuse of personnel, no harsh or inhumane treatment. I'm still speaking about global best practices and standards. Okay. This 7th point here, they talk about working hours, and that generally speaking, a normal work week, not including overtime, shall not exceed 48 hours. Let me ask a question. Let me see if you are following. What is the work hours, the standard work hours in Nigeria? Please put it in the chat box if you know. What's the standard average work hours in Nigeria? Now, according to SA 8000, they are saying should not exceed. So they didn't say it must be 48 hours. They say should not exceed 48 hours. And they say employees must get 1 day off following every 6 consecutive work days with some exception, okay? Overtime is what? Voluntary. So you can't force your staff to do overtime and say, after all, I will pay you overtime, work overtime. No. Overtime must not be regular. It must not be more than 12 hours per week, okay? And required overtime will be negotiated in the CBA. What does CBA mean? CBA is an acronym for Collective Bargaining Agreement. Collective Bargaining Agreement. What is collective bargaining agreement? It is the outcome of deliberation between the unions or the representatives of the employees and the employer and HR. Are we together? So an organization cannot just come and unilaterally insist on overtime, both the timing and the payment. Lastly, but not the least, as I round up this first session on providing a global international overview to your understanding so that you can have this superstructure foundation in your HR growth and career. The last thing here, the 8th point is on remuneration, okay? And some of the key points here include respect of right of personnel towards living wage. Note, they didn't say minimum wage. How does minimum wage come about? Typically, a legislation by the state. Typically, after negotiation between union, employee representatives, employer representatives, and the government. But we all know that minimum wage is not reviewed or amended frequently. When last is our current minimum wage? How old is it? Quite a number of years. So do we see here that the standard does not speak to minimum wage? Rather, it speaks to what? Living wage, which means it will support the sustenance, the survival, okay? It will ensure the employee is not in a precarious condition, okay? So it is very important. It also states that workers will be paid at least the legal minimum wage, and so on and so forth. The last thing here that I would like to quickly shed light on is that this global best practice prohibits use of labor-only contracting, short-term contracts, forced apprenticeship schemes. So when you continue to, you are just renewing the contract, it means you are trying to use deceit to get cheap labor, okay? So it is very, very important. Let me also quickly chip this in. I still have 1 minute for this segment. The international best practice does not support deductions for disciplinary purposes, generally speaking. So this one that, oh, you came late, remove half-day salary. They are generally practices that may be prevalent in certain countries with certain type of employees or employers of labor, but don't align with international best practice. So you are not encouraged to even be the one suggesting that, oh, management, let us introduce fine deduction, because they earn this income. You are not supposed to arbitrarily shortchange them or reduce how much they will earn. Okay, so let's go to the chat box now. What have you picked? What have you picked so far? Let's just take a 1 or 2 minutes breather. What have you picked so far? I want to ensure that nobody is ghosting on this call that we are following. Please, let's see quickly in the chat box. I would like to read out 1 or 2 comments. What have you picked? What has been the highlight of what you have picked from this conversation so far? sometimes I wish this was WhatsApp, where you will see that people are typing. With Zoom, you will only see that when a message comes in. Okay, so while that is going on, let me just quickly move on and say that employee relationship has different definitions. Okay, and we'll go to that in a bit, but let me just read one particular definition here. And it says employment relationship deals with the individual and the collective dimensions of labor, including the buying and selling of labor power. Labor power here means human resources, okay? Employment relationship is the totality of the relationship between all parties involved in the production of goods and services, and how industrial harmony can be continually sustained in the productive system. Okay, now these are the actors in industrial relationship. These are the actors in industry, in the marketplace. So you have the government, you have the workers, and you have the employers. So let me quickly differentiate this. So there are some words we sometimes use interchangeably, or we use them together. We have employee relations and we have industrial relations. So typically, generally, when we talk about employee relations, we typically often refer to employee relations in a context where there are no unions. In other words, you just have an organization and you have employees. So the relationship between the organization and the employee, that HR midwives, in that context, we typically say that is employee relations, okay? And it is guided by principles and policies. It works in high maturity environments and low legal constraints environment. We now have the other one, which is industrial relations. So the moment you are talking about industrial relations, it means of a necessity that you have what we call labor union or labor union. So there are some organizations or some sectors, they have as many as 3, 4 unions. Some we have only one. Okay. So once you have union in your organization, and what you are doing now is now industrial relations. In real life setting, even when you have union, don't forget that not all your employees will choose or opt to be part of the union. So what we see is that you are doing a combination of both labor union and both employee relations and industrial relations. So it is running concurrently. Okay, so industrial relations is guided by labor and social laws from government, okay, like the labor law, which we have shared, and then we can share it again now, please, if you don't mind. And then it is also guided by a CBA, collective bargaining agreement, okay, which is an outcome of deliberations, consultations, engagement by employers and employee representatives, okay? And in industrial relations, networking is very critical and also very helpful. So let's tie everything together here. We have the employee relations, we have the industrial relations, and then we have the legal relations. Now, oftentimes, when things don't work smoothly, maybe there is a dispute that the two parties, that is labor on one hand and employer on the other hand, cannot resolve. It typically leads to either arbitration or litigation, and you may need to go to court. Okay, we have the Nigerian National Industrial Court, for example, or it can be regular court, depending on what the matter is, what the context is, and where the complainants in this context goes to first. Okay, but typically is the last resort. So there are certain agreements that will state that if there's a dispute, we won't just go to the court, we may go to arbitration. Now, arbitration is also largely managed by governments and apparatus, but it is faster, it is cheaper, and than the court. So we have legal relations. So the different stakeholders, the three core stakeholders have different, how do I say this? Different needs, different objectives. The government wants productive industrial atmosphere that guarantees increased tax income. Because if people are not working, they won't be paid, and commerce, trade will what? Will reduce. The employers want also a peaceful and productive atmosphere to grow. They want to maximize their profits and shareholder returns. The workers, among other things, they want improved wages. They want better conditions of service. So another word, another term for the CBA, which is collective bargaining agreement, is COS, conditions of service. So these phrases are interchangeable. They are more or less like synonyms in the industrial relations lexicon. So you can either say collective bargaining agreement, CBA, or conditions of service, COS. Are we together? So the interest of labor, typically satisfaction of their basic needs, their survival. They want to sell their talent, their skills, their time over a period of time to the organization. Typically, to labor is sometimes afraid, jittery, that technology, capital-intensive production means may, impact on their capacity to continue to work. So, artificial intelligence, machinery, equipment, when you automate a plant in a building, maybe what 200 people used to do before, you may just need 3-4 people. These are concerns, and genuine concerns of labor. Also, there's this concern that each time you increase wages, it may or may not affect profits. It won't affect profit if only and only if you can increase productivity correspondingly, or even more than proportionately. Okay, so you have the work environment, and you have employees who also have discretionary capability. They can withhold services, and they may come to work and be working slow and not give their best. You also have the external environment, and some of the factors that determine the external environment may be the legislation and the rules of engagement. Okay, so these are some of the roles of each of stakeholders. The government maintain laws to shape and guide industrial relations atmosphere. So there are quite a number of laws, okay, and we need to get this clearly, even though we have shared only one called the Labor Act or the Labor Law. But that in itself is not the only law. There are other associated laws that are directly and indirectly contributory to shaping industrial relations. So you have the Labor Law, you have the Trade Union Act, you have the Workmen Compensation Act, we have the Factories Act, you have the Pension Act, even the Payee Act, okay, and then the very recent Finance Act that was just passed into law, I think that took effect January 1 this year, all have effects, direct and indirect, on employee and employers alike. The role of the employers too includes complying with those laws and the collective agreement or the COS signed with the union, maintaining a fair labor practice. When we talk about fair labor practice, we discuss them when we open this session. And how do you maintain fair labor practice? Policies, procedures, values, principles, and then continuous engagement and communication. So when you are coming up with any policy in your organization or for your organization, it must be fair. It must be consistent. It must not be at variance with any of these international best practice or any of the provisions of the Labor Act. Otherwise, your policy will be technically null and void or will be faulty. So when you are putting together a policy, the first thing is what aspect of the labor law speaks around this policy. you need to familiarize yourself with that aspect so that you don't come up, you may be doing a good thing from your own perspective, but you may be doing a bad thing, an illegal thing. Okay, so something may in quote feel good, but may be illegal. Sometimes so something may feel bad, but may be legal. So you need to be familiar with it, that you just don't come up with policies, processes, procedures out of context without touching base. So let me also say this at this point, that we have many lawyers who also happen to be HR professionals, and that's very good. That's very good. We also have many organizations who have a legal department as a standalone department. That is also very good. So whether you have an HR colleague who is a lawyer, or you have a legal department in your organization, or in some instances, many organizations may not necessarily have a full-fledged legal department, but they will have a law firm on retainership. It doesn't matter. What I want to say now is that make sure as much as possible you leverage on the lawyers within your space. So let me give you an example. If you are doing a policy, it is not bad to send it to your own internal legal team or your lawyers on retainership to review it for you. They may not be reading the English. No, they are not doing, what do you call it, grammar editing. A comma in front of something or at the back of something can change the meaning. Okay, so let me say this. Let's say you've never done an offer letter before. I will advise the first offer letter, run it through a lawyer, either internally or externally. The subsequent letters you are rolling out, as long as it's copy and paste, so to speak, you may not necessarily run those through the lawyer again, except there is a real change in context. So let me give you an example. So maybe you had an offer letter you have been using for 5, 6, 7 years, and then COVID happened. They now wanted to put certain provisions to maybe put COVID into perspective, remote working, flexible. It may be good to run it through your legal department, internal or external again. So I'm not saying that because you have access to the labor law, because you've done a training on labor law, that doesn't make you a lawyer. Okay, even at my stage, I am in bed consistently with the legal department of my organizations, and we are brainstorming, rubbing minds, and where necessary, we also consult our external lawyers so that we all survive and make the best decisions based on collective wisdom. So I just said I should mention this and drop this at this point. So what are the roles of the workers? One, comply with company policies, the laws, the collective agreements, while maintaining a peaceful and productive industrial atmosphere. It's also part of the duties of the workers and the unions, to educate, enlighten their members. They are also part of grievance and conflict resolution at a certain level to ensure that. So what are trouble triggers before we quickly swing over and go to the labor law itself? Okay, when you don't have a clear process, it can cause trouble in employee or industrial relations. Everything is the MD said, Oga said. No, there should be clear-cut policies and procedures. When you have too many changes in a short time, okay, even if those changes are good, but if they are too frequent, it can be upsetting. It can be irritating. You are just adjusting and then you change it again. All right, they will say, we don't even know when they will change this again because of change management. Also, poor communication can be a big problem. You may have a good idea. The idea or the proposal, the proposition may even be in the interest, in the benefit of the employees. But if you don't communicate well, if you don't engage adequately, you may cause some problems. Okay. Also, perception of unfair practices. Okay. Lack of understanding of roles. Maybe people don't have a clear-cut job description, a JD. Lack of understanding of rights and responsibilities. Some people may be in union and they've not read the procedural agreements, or they are not familiar with the labor law, or the members of the HR or the members of the management. So because they worked in company A and they used to do something in a certain way in company A, they will just import it into company B and think it's the right thing to do. That you have been doing something for a long time does not necessarily make it right. I typically say that longevity does not connote legality. Okay, it's very important. Let us check what does the law say. Okay, lack of engagement of employees in pursuing company objectives. So these are some of the key things. So at this point, if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat box. I don't know, do I have any questions so far? Opemiko, do I have any question? I can take one or two questions.
No questions yet.
Okay, good.
No questions yet. I think it's just you're based on your first question around what people had picked up.
Okay, all right. We can take one or two questions. Maybe you want to unmute and ask your question on what we have discussed so far, or you want to drop it in a chat box. That is also so good. Okay, so how do you have a good employee relations practice? How do you have good industrial relations practice? Put in place company values and principles. Have a labor relations strategy. The involvement of all employees, consultation is very key. Having appropriate HR management systems, processes, procedures, very key. Having a robust grievance and conflict resolution procedure, very key. Work structure, clarity of each role and linking it to the business. Then having fair wages and benefits, okay? Also, let it be, as much as possible, be transparent, be visible, and you need to communicate. You can't overemphasize communication. A lot of things that causes, discord at the workplace, sometimes it's lack of communication. You just introduce, so communication is so powerful that even when you are introducing a policy, you communicate. How did you even come about the policy? As much as possible, pick like a representation across the different stakeholders in the organization. Even discuss the policy with them before you even draft it. Get their input, their buy-in, their suggestion. When you draft it, run it through them again. Of course, consult and engage, so that by the time the policy is finally coming out, it has a people face. You might have changed one or two things, and you might have picked one or two brilliant ideas that you would have ignored. Okay, relationship is also very key. As much as possible, we spend a large chunk, at least prior to COVID-19, of our life at work, physically. So try and make it a family as much as possible. Then know that you will always have dissenting voice. Just look at Nigeria, look at the number of tribes, culture, religion we have. So everybody cannot see everything from the same perspective. So you need to be able to manage all your special interest groups, even if you won't do what they say, giving them the opportunity to air their opinion, to share their thoughts. And if and where you can't, run with it, let them know that, you recognize this particular fact. You don't shut them up or shut them in. Give them the opportunity to express their views, and then you maybe let them know why you can't take that idea on board, maybe just yet. Because sometimes you may not take it up now, and then you take it up later. So now, this is the point where, if you can, I don't know how you are listening to this, if you can, open the Labor Act. We've shared it a couple of times, and we've shared it across different platforms this evening again. So if you don't mind, just do me a favor, okay? If you can, maybe on your laptop, on your phone, your tablet, open the Labor Act, because the truth is, there is no way I can run through the Labor Act. I will need a day or two or more, but do me a favor, okay? Please commit to this, that after now, between today and next week Friday, I'll give you 8 days. Please make sure you have read the Labor Act back to back. Between today, so this is a commitment I'm making on behalf of all of you. Please live up to it. Please don't tell me you've read it before. Read it again, okay? Like what the Bible is to us Christians is what the Labor Act is to HR practitioners. So that you read the Bible yesterday doesn't mean you won't read it today. So read it again. Your eyes will open to new insights and concepts. So the Labor Act has undergone quite a number of revisions. We have the 1971 version, the 1974 version, the 2005 version. As we speak, it is undergoing review. In fact, it has been undergoing this review for more than a year. I'm just trusting God that under this republic, before the end of this era, that the revised version will be battered and delivered to the public. They've done public hearings. They've taken position papers from members of the public, from Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, and from the different representatives of the union, principally the TUC, Trade Union Congress, and NLC, Nigerian Labour Congress, which are umbrella bodies of even a wider array of unions. So I've been notified that there's a question now. Okwemipo, do you want to read the question, please? Let's take the question, please. Feel free to drop
the question is how practicable, sustainable are these employee relations principles in a consulting firm where you have different clients and needs, particularly where you have clients who literally give you the job just to avoid compliance and expect you to deal with it? So how practicable, sustainable, and compliant are these employee relations principles?
Okay, and thank you so much for that question. And thank you to the person who dropped it. So what I see here at the heart of this question is philosophy. What do I mean by philosophy? So you will see like a class struggle. You will see capitalism on one and socialism on the other hand. I'll explain, before someone says I'm speaking in parables. So maybe there's a dirty job. The firm does not want to be seen as being the one to do the dirty job. Maybe right sizing, downsizing, restructuring. They now bring in a consultant or a consulting firm to come and do it. It doesn't matter whether you are the employee, the employer, direct employer, or the indirect employer. You have to make sure that you follow international best practice and the local labor law. Okay. Now, the truth is, one of the core values, core ethics of any standard consulting firm is ethics. And you can't take out ethics without legalism. Okay. So I must say this, at least I can speak for the top 4 consulting firms. I won't mention their name, but you know what we mean by the top 4. I've worked in places before in my career where 1, 2 of the top 4 turned down a brief from my organization. Not where I work currently, one of the places I worked about 8, 9, 10 years ago. I was shocked that we are going to pay you guys money. They first profiled us, the organization, okay? The owners, they profiled the owners of the organization before they took the brief. In one particular instance, they turned down the brief. And I've worked in another particular instance, they accepted the brief, but they also gave certain conditions. Okay, so I'd like you to know that consulting firms also turn down briefs. They don't say yes. Some of them, especially the multinational consulting firm, you can't just decide from the Nigerian body to onboard a new business. You will have to send it to maybe Egypt, South Africa, or Japan, where they will do risk assessment. Okay, but the bottom line, and this will be my submission on this question, is that it doesn't matter whether you are the primary employer or you are an agent of the employer. You have to do the right thing and you have to be seen to do the right thing. I hope my feedback has been quite helpful. Any other question, Okwemipo?
Yes, there's another one. So
okay,
it says, so what disciplinary measure can be applied to discourage tardiness, absenteeism, and how best can this solution be presented to management that strongly believe in salary deduction? So you had talked about salary deduction.
Yes.
So this person is asking, what disciplinary measure can you apply to manage that, right?
Yes.
And for management to buy into that, because you know how management can be sometimes.
Yes, fantastic. So let me say this. Permit me to borrow from the medical palace. You see, when you see lateness is actually not the disease. It is a symptom. So when people are coming late, that lateness is a manifestation of a deeper problem. Now, that deeper problem may be an individual problem or an organizational problem, or it may begin as an individual problem and transit to. I will need Ogbeni to help me check the person who is not muted and kindly help me mute the person. Don't debit the person, just mute the person. Okay, so you need to engage with the person. Now, there are different reasons why people come late. So let's take Lagos, for example. Where is your office and what is the resumption time? Where do people live? So when your office, for example, is at Aja and you are hiring people at Okokomaiko, you have hired a latecomer by default, except the person is willing to relocate. Because if you expect that person to be leaving home 4 a.m. every day, it won't be sustainable. Okay, that's one. So the solution in that instance may be you can introduce flexi working hours. So I used to work in a place in the past, a very good place, where for like 6 months or 1 year in a particular year, they had trailer issues around Festac, Satellite Town. All our 5-6 staff coming from that area, incidentally, were living in their personal houses. So they are not tenants that you can say, oh, at the expiration of your rent, please move to another location. They were rigid, so to speak. I engaged with my MD. I said, sir, what matters to you is that these people give you 8 hours of quality work. Don't let us be rigid on 8 to 5. Let's give these people 9 to 6. And we gave them that option. It was because of those people who introduced that flex. So you could either do 8 to 5, 9 to 6, or 10 to 7. And all of them opted for 9 to 6. Guess what? None of them ever came late within that period again. Now, I know that no matter what you do, some people too may have a temporal problem. Maybe they have to first go to the hospital to take an injection or something. And I've had an encounter with a particular staff that was undergoing fertility treatment. They were trusting God for the fruit of the womb. And so, but they were shy. So they didn't tell anyone or the HR because they felt, oh, if I tell you that I'm going to the hospital, maybe the next question will be for what? And they were shy. It was at the point of disciplinary proceedings that they not even brought documents. And now the HR tried to take some blame that, wow, your employee cannot confide in you on such a problem like this. So is to look at various ways to assist and support. However, that doesn't say you can't issue a query to an employee. So, you know, you have graduations of escalations in procedure. So it can be maybe the first time you get a verbal caution, maybe the next time you get a written warning, maybe the third time, maybe you face a panel. So you may also need to say how many times must you come late that is too much. Okay, so that if you are excessive, you know, a habitual or perpetual latecomer, you may even be terminated in line with organizational policy, which means, of course, you'll have been issued documented queries, you'll have been given opportunity to explain and clarify, you'll have faced panels, and if symptoms persist, you may be terminated. But note, I can terminate you and never will I have deducted your money. Okay? Because the truth is, practically speaking, when you deduct people's money, what I have noticed, and I'm sure many of us on this call can testify to this, employees always find a way to get that money back, either by withholding their discretionary effort, or by stealing, or by diverting customer assets, organizational assets, or time. You will pay for it. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Miko. Do we have any other question?
Yeah, there are 2 more questions.
Okay.
So the first one is, can you please cite the difference between employee relations and industrial relations? And you can just post that, maybe you'll take that later since you've covered that before in the interest of time. But the other one is, what is the difference between NLC and TUC, and which unions belong to what?
Okay, all right. So from let me first tell you the similarity. They are both trade unions recognized by the federal government of Nigeria. Previously, there used to be only one union called the NLC. But at the advent of the return of democracy under His Excellency, former President Obasanjo, some people say that it was a ploy to weaken labor generally through the divide and rule technique. Some people also say it was because of infighting and the struggle for power in the labor class, the union class. So government now allow them to form another union. Don't forget that there is freedom of association. So you can also legislate that there must only be one association to fight for employees. Okay, so in principle and technically, there's no difference between the two. The only difference is the unions that decided to stay with NUC and the unions that decided to go with TUC. So there's no fine line that maybe all the unions in oil and gas are with TUC and all the unions in manufacturing are in no. In some instances, you see a cross section. So, and it is not material because in HR is principle we look at. Okay. And you will see that oftentimes both TUC and NLC still at the end of the day meet together and determine to go on strike. The last 2-3 nationwide strike that have been embarked on have been by the two, because they know that if only one of them goes on strike, the strike will be weakened from day one. Okay, so let me quickly move to the concluding part, which is on the Act and Labor Law itself. Okay, so I had said that we should please open the Act. Okay, so if you have opened it, just do me a favor, control find. I'm talking as if you are using a laptop or a phone now, but I guess you can also control find or search, use the search option on your phone. Just put maternity in the Labor Act. I'm talking about the Labor Act that you downloaded. Download maternity, because what I'm teaching you right now is how to find something, okay? Because that's very important. So before you take a decision, just control find. So let's say you want to take a decision around maternity, or you're writing a policy on leave and you get to maternity section, you want to say, oh, what does the labor law say? What do you do? Control find or search, put the word maternity. So just look for a keyword that best describes what you are thinking about. Maybe it's for a man and you want to say, oh, what does the labor law say about paternity leave? Just drop paternity in the labor law. Now, in some instances, it will return multiple options, maybe 5, 10, 15, if it is a very popular matter. In that case, it may be in your interest to read all the segments so that you can get the full understanding. In some cases, it will return 1 or 2. So that is how to, so if you want to say salary now or wages, just search for wages, control find, and then you check all the sections where wages is. So let me quickly do an overview so that we can cover grounds. Okay, so the Labor Act has 4 parts: the general provisions, part 2, recruitment, part 3 speaks about special classes of workers and miscellaneous special provisions, while part 4 is what? Supplementary. Also, let's see in slightly broader detail. So if you have the Labor Act with you, you can just go to the appropriate section. Section 1 to 6 talks about protection of wages. 6 sections were dedicated to what? Protection of wages. Section 7 to 12 talks about contract of employment. So somebody will come and say, Oluyemi, please, can you share your letter of employment template with me? No, sir, no, ma. The template or the ingredient for a template is in the Labor Act. What and what at the minimum should be in a contract of employment. You can add more based on the peculiarity of the organization. You don't need Oluyemi's template. You have one or the ingredients for one in the Labor Act. Section 13 to 20 also talks about terms and conditions of employment. Section 21 and 22 is general. Part 2 talks about recruiting. Okay, so section 23 to 32 talks about recruiters and recruiting generally. Section 33 to 44 talks about recruitment for employment in Nigeria. Section 45 to 48 talks about enforcement provisions. Now, part 3 talks about special classes of workers and miscellaneous special provisions. Okay, so you have section 49 to 58 talking about apprehentis, section 49 to 58. Section 59 to 64 talks about young persons. Section 59 to 64, young persons. Section 65 talks about domestic service. So your house help, your nanny is covered in the labor law. that your gate man, that your megad is in the labor law. Domestic service, section 65. I encourage everybody to read section 65 so that you will judge for yourself whether you have been treating your domestic service appropriately or otherwise. Section 66 to 67 talks about labor health areas. So when you talk about, in quotes, so to speak, using popular parlance, health, HMO, and things around health, labor health areas, okay, 66 to 67. Section 68 to 72 speaks about registration, employment, exchanges, and so on and so forth. Section 73 to 74 speaks about what? Forced labor. Where do you think they got the forced labor from? Your guess is as good as mine. But they speak about forced labor. Now, the fourth part, which is the final part, is called supplemental. Section 75 to 76 talks about records and returns. Section 77 to 79 talks about settlement of disputes. Okay. Section 86 to 92 is miscellaneous. Miscellaneous just means different kind of random things, that have impact on the employer or the employee, as the case may be. So because of time, we'll just take a few of these sections, just a few of them randomly, okay, not in any particular order, just to highlight, what we're speaking about today. Section 91 defines who a worker is. If you're an HR professional, it has to know this. You have to know this, okay? A worker, as defined by the labor law, is any person who has entered into or works under contract with an employer, whether the contract is for manual labor, clerical work, whether it is expressed or implied. Please pay attention though. Whether it is oral or written, okay? Whether it is a contract of service or a contract personally to execute any work or labor. I put it to you again. That's your gate man, Musa at the gate. That's your nanny. Folake in the house is a worker. My next question to you, are you paying him the minimum wage? Because a worker has nothing to do with whether you gave them offer letter or not, because it states here whether it is oral, verbal, or written. Okay, so please take notes. Let's also look at section 7 here. This talks about contract of employment. Don't forget, I'm just picking a few. We're not going through. We have committed to each other that everybody on this call will read the labor law between now and next week, Friday, 8 days, okay? And it's doable, it's achievable. I read it in 2 days when I want to read it, okay? And I don't commit the whole day to it. So let's look at this. Except a worker has entered a written contract of employment and possesses a copy, section 7 makes it compulsory for every employer to give to the worker within a period not exceeding 3 months after commencement of work, a written statement specifying what? The following. Now, this is the template for employment letter. All of you, as I'm reading it, just benchmark. Does your current or previous employment letters follow this, or does it have element of this? 1, name of the employer and the undertaking by which the employee is employed. 2, name and address of the worker and the place and date of his or her employment. 3, nature of the employment. 4, the date when the contract is to expire if it is fixed. The period of notice to be given by the party wishing to terminate the contract with due regards to section 11. So there's another section 11. Wages and the manner of its payment. The period of payment of wages, any terms and conditions relating to A, hours of work, B, holidays and holiday pay, C, incapacity for work due to sickness or injury, including any provision for sick pay, any special condition of the contract. I'm sure all of us can see almost everything here, plus more in our current contracts of employment or previous, or the ones we have issued. This is where it was gotten from. This is the baseline, okay? And don't forget that there's any special condition. So there may be something peculiar about your organization or industry. So let's also look at this. Terms forbidden in a contract. One, so, some people wonder why most organizations pay every month. It's not just arbitrarily, it's a law. According to the labor law, wages must be paid it is forbidden that wages are paid at intervals exceeding 1 month, except authorized by the state. So you can't be paying every 5 weeks. You can't be paying every 6 weeks, but you can pay daily. You can pay weekly. You can pay every 2 weeks. But the maximum interval is what? 1 month. So when in a one-man business, they are paying on the 82 or the 82, they are breaking a law. Okay, the worker can be made liable for the debt. It is also forbidden that the worker can be made liable for the debt or default of another person. So because Oluyemi is owing, you will now take Theophilus' pay to pay for Oluyemi's debt. It is forbidden. It is forbidden that a worker's employment shall depend on whether he or she joins or does not join a trade union, or he shall remain or not remain a member of the is forbidden. Okay, in the past, we've had 1 or 2 organizations in the financial sector saying it is illegal. A worker cannot be dismissed or be prejudiced by reason of trade union membership or because of trade union activities outside working hours with the consent of the employer. So if you have, for example, union leaders in your employee, you have to treat them carefully, okay, carefully. Now let's look at section 11 that talks about termination of employment, okay. Employment can be terminated by either party subject to the terms of the contract. In other words, what is written in your employment letter, or in the absence of such. So let's say you don't have any terms of disengagement in your letter. It is in the labor law. 1 day notice where the contract has continued for 3 months or less. 1 week notice where the contract has continued for more than 3 months but less than 2 years. 2 weeks notice where the contract has continued for 2 years but less than 5 years. 1 month notice where the contract has continued for 5 years and above. I guess that if I take a poll on this Zoom call, this meeting powered by the Covenant Nation Human Resource Community Group, that what is the average notice period in our employment letter, I will take a bet that what the average will be 1 month. I know a few people may be 3 months, a few people may be 2 months, a few people may be 2 weeks, especially if they've not been confirmed. Where did organization get that 1 month general notice from? They took the maximum for 5 years and above, and everybody started putting 1 month. Now, if you read the labor law, you will suddenly see why some things have been done in a certain way. It's not just because somebody somewhere decided to do so. Some people see it in letters, they don't know why. Now you know why, and you can have access to the why. Okay, let's look at section 1 to 5 and section 15 that talks about wages and salary. Okay, I hope we are together. I hope we are getting value. Okay, so section 1 to 5 yes. And section 15. Thank you for that feedback. So if a contract of employment or any part of the whole of the wages of a worker is payable in any other manner, the contract shall be illegal, null and void. It must be payable only in legal tender. In other words, in Nigeria, Naira. So you can't tell your staff that because your company is producing cement, that come and use your salary to, instead of salary, let me give you 20 bags of cement. No. Now, if you give the staff the money, the staff is free to say, I want to buy cement. But you can't say, we don't have cash. Just take 20 bags of food there. That's not a legal tender. Legal tender in this context is what? Naira. It is illegal for the employer to include in a contract the place at which a worker is to be paid or how the worker should spend his or her wages. So by the time you are deducting the person for late coming, you are already spending their wages for them. Also, wages cannot be allowed to be paid to a worker in a premise used for the sale of alcohol or for retail sale of goods unless the worker is employed on such premise. In other words, when you go and pay somebody in a drinking beer parlor, what are you trying to say? You are trying to let them spend it irrationally, in quotes now. Now, look at this. Look at this. This is important. Some of us already do this. The law does not encourage advance payment in excess of 1 month. In other words, so if a staff comes to meet you, that's where this word salary advance comes from. A salary is what? 1 month wage, typically. So when your company, in quotes, you are not supposed to give your staff 1 year salary as low. The law does not encourage any advance payment in excess of 1 month. Now, where advance payment has been made, the employer has maximum of 3 months to recover it. So look at this carefully. So if you borrow the staff, say 60,000 naira, for the staff to pay back, they will pay 20K next month, 20K the following month, 20K the subsequent month. So what if you have borrowed him more than 1 month? Okay, so you have 3 months to recover it. In other words, this is where the principle of people not paying more than 33% of their salary as repayment for loan, either to the organization or to what? A bank. It is from the labor law that concept came from, as you can see clearly now. Okay. An employer is not permitted to make any deduction by way of discount, interest, or any form of charge on account of any advance wages paid to the worker in anticipation of regular payment of his wages. Okay, so let's look at some deductions. Okay, what are the deductions that are allowed by the labor law? The deductions, the following deductions are some of the allowable deductions. 1, for the purpose of contribution to the National Social Insurance Trust Fund, pension fund, or such other schemes approved by the state. 2, for contribution to trade union of which the worker is qualified to be a member. It must, however, be noted that members of senior staff association must voluntarily agree in writing. For senior staff, it must be in writing voluntarily before deductions can be made from their wages as contribution to their unions. 3, deductions can also be made where there has been overpayment of wages and salary, and same was discovered within 3 months of overpayment. You guys need to pay attention to this, which means that if you discover that you overpaid me 6 months ago, what has happened to the money? According to the labor law, the money has gone. It's a gift. The money has gone. So, which means that from this knowledge, you must be auditing your payroll not later than every 3 months. Why? After the 3rd month, you will legally lose the capacity to try and retrieve the money. Are we together? So you can see what I'm saying may not look convenient, may not look nice, but this is what the labor law says. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's try and cover some more grounds. Okay. Okay. So next is sick leave and holidays. All right. A worker that absent himself or herself as a result of temporary ill health is entitled to be paid up to 12 working days in a year if the illness is certified by a registered medical provider, provided that at the time of the illness, the contract still subsists. So people are entitled to 12 working paid medical leave. And note, the labor law does not say by your own organization's HMO. No, it is any registered medical provider. So you can't tell me now, because I've had in 1 or 2 places in the past that maybe somebody will go to a state hospital and the company will reject it and say, no, the teaching hospital is not on our HMO. No, the labor law says registered medical practitioner. Who registered it? Is not your HMO that registers them. It's the government, it's the state. Are we together? Please, let's be guided by some of these things. Why you can say, I encourage you to go to the HMO. You can't insist. Okay. Another point here says, when a worker engages in a work continuously for 1 year, he or she is legally entitled to holiday with full pay for at least 6 working days, or in the case of a person less than 16 years, apprentice inclusive, 12 working days. Okay, so how many working days do we have on our leave? Please type it in the chat box. Let's try and find an average. Okay, how many working days? Where you work today, how many working days? I want to see. Now, let me also quickly state this at this juncture, that where the labor law says something, for example, in this context, they tell you the minimum. It does not have to be a maximum. So if you do more than what the labor law prescribes, you are safe. If you do less than what the labor law prescribes, you are doing an illegal act or activity. Are we together? I'm sure if you check what people are dropping or will drop on the chat box, very few people here will put 6 days. You will see something like 15, 20, 22, 25, 28, which means most companies are doing way better than the law. My question to you again, sometimes I like domesticating this conversation. Your house help at home, do you give them 6 leave days every year at the minimum, or you will tell them to be going? They are also entitled to leave. Worst case scenario, 6 working days. All right. Now, this is interesting. It is unlawful, and this is in section 8 of the labor law, for a worker, for an employer to pay the worker money instead of the holiday. I will read that again. In other words, you can't monetize the leave and say, Oluyemi, don't go on leave. Well, take 20K, take 50K, take 5K. No, you can't buy the leave off. It is unlawful. But a person who is no longer in employment, but has completed more than 6 months in the continuous employment, may be paid money equal to full pay of 1 week at the normal rate. Why do you think the labor law makes it illegal for you to buy somebody's leave, so to speak? I will tell you. You will remember that when we started this conversation and we were talking about international best practice, we spoke around employee health and safety, organizational health and safety. You see, one of the core reasons for leave is not just because people can travel for sightseeing. It is to recuperate. It is seen that it's a health hazard if people continuously work and they don't rest. That is why, for example, we have weekend and we are not allowed to, in quotes, continuously work continually. When you work 5-6 days, you take 1 or 2 days off. It's because rest is essential to our normal health, normal life cycle. Okay, so don't give somebody money and give them sickness. That is what they are saying here. Okay, let me see what else I can do around this. Okay, so it's also the duty of the employer to provide work. In section 17 of the labor law, it is mandatory for the employer to provide work to the employee. And if for any reason or reasons they fail to provide work, it is your employer's duty to pay the worker because they have presented themselves for what? For work. Also in section 17, the employer can only be excused in circumstances beyond his control for 1 week. And if more than 1 week, then for a period, a labor officer, which is an employee, a staff of the Ministry of Labor, okay, may allow. The worker is, however, entitled to the first day wage out of the 7 days. Now, this is very interesting. From time to time, depending on where and how long we work, we'll encounter this. Okay, redundancy. This is a key concept when they lay off workers. and it happens for different reasons, but the labor law makes provision for it. So what is redundancy? Redundancy is said to occur whenever an excess of manpower necessitates loss of work. In other words, you have too many staff relative to the job, relative to the work activity, relative to production activity, then it can lead to what? Redundancy. In such situation, the employer has a duty to inform the trade union. Listen to this. Now, what if you don't have a trade union or the representatives of the workers of the reasons for and the extent of the anticipated redundancy? So you have to explain the reason to them, and you have to tell them the extent of the anticipated redundancy. The principle of last in, first out, LIFO, for accounting students. You remember FIFO and LIFO. Last in, first out must be used subject to other factors. And there are 3 key other factors. Pay attention, it will save your career. 1, skill. So in case you just change organization, in the unlikely event of redundancy, you are an easy candidate because you will fall under the last in, first out. What can you use to augment yourself? Skill, ability, and reliability. Skill, ability, and reliability. And some of our tools, like our performance management systems, are tools that help measure reliability so that it doesn't become subjective and line manager A doesn't like employee B. Okay. The Ministry of Labor may make a regulation for compulsory payment of redundancy allowance on the termination of the worker's employment on the grounds of redundancy. Otherwise, okay, the employer must use his or her best effort to negotiate redundancy payment to workers whose employment are terminated due to redundancy. So you negotiate that, okay, we want to sack 15 drivers because you have outsourced it. How much do you pay them? Maybe 1 month salary for every year completed, or whatever the bargaining, for the ability to pay and how well the union can negotiate, and as well as the organizational representative. So section 9, 49, 50, and 53 talks about apprentice, but because of time, I'll skip that. So let's look at this. This is interesting. We have exemption of women from certain employment and maternity protection. So look at this labor law, for example. It says night work is not permitted for women except she is a nurse engaged in agricultural undertaking as a manual laborer. If the work involves the preservation of raw materials that may get spoiled and the night work is necessitated due to unforeseen circumstances. The law also states that also no woman can be employed in an underground work in any mine, okay, except she's undergoing a study which requires her to occasionally enter underground or occasionally enters underground for a non-manual work. Now let's go to maternity. At this juncture, if we can make this interactive, I would like to engage 1 or 2 women. Okay, please indulge me here. Now, the law states that a pregnant woman, and it can be Opemipo, so that to make it interesting. Opemipo, are you with me? I hope I'm not putting you on the spot.
I'm here, but I'm not pregnant. I've already delivered my baby. I just resumed from maternity leave, actually.
Oh, fantastic! You are a good sparring mate on this. So you are my co-debater. So the labor law says, Opemipo, that a pregnant woman is entitled to 6 weeks before, note, before and 6 weeks after childbirth, once she produces a medical certificate. Let us see if Okpemipo did something legal or illegal. Did you go 6 weeks before your EDD, Okpemipo?
No, I didn't. I went 4 weeks.
You see?
So the policy in my company is 4 weeks if you bring a medical report saying that you're fit to work. But 6 weeks is actually the recommended time, but 4 weeks, provided that the medical person says you are still fit to work up to 4 weeks. So I did 4 weeks, not 6 weeks.
Thumbs up for you and your organization. I've worked in places where we literally drove the female staff to the delivery room from the office. Why? They wanted their 12 weeks to start post-delivery. Now, let me say this. If you want to work by the books, do you know that if you tell a woman 6 weeks after birth to come back to work, you may argue that it may not be wrong. Why? The law does not just state 12 weeks. It apportions the 12 weeks, 6 weeks before, 6 weeks after. But organizations and employees have now tried to modify. We just got an instance of you can do 4 weeks before with a medical report. That is not what the labor law says. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying what that practice is bad, but I'm saying in the context. So the truth is, you will see that there are some things in this labor law. 90% of organizations don't practice it. I don't know the current review, maybe it will now be couched in a way that maybe 6 weeks before and after, or at the discretion of medical advice of the female employee's doctor. I don't want to say that. Now, let me also say this. She is also, when I say she, that is a female employee in this context, is entitled to 50% of her wages, irrespective of her absence, and cannot be given notice of dismissal during her maternity leave. Now, if you want to be very legalistic and bureaucratic, it means that you should pay 50%. But guess what? Almost all organizations pay 100%. In other words, this buttress a point I earlier made that when the labor law states something, you can do better than the labor law. You can't do worse. So if we say 50% here in quote, because the woman is not in quote, rendering service currently to the organization. But the average organization was like, after all, before she was due, she was rendering service, all things being equal, she will come back and continue to render service. Why are we paying 50%? And almost a large chunk of organizations say, no, pay them the full. I also hope that this 50% will be revised to 100% in the labor law. I hope so, but I point this out to also show that sometimes there are things organizations do, in quotes, we don't thank them for it, and they are doing way better than the labor law. First, this 50% maternity wage, and then even leave generally. Okay. Now, look at this also. It states that a woman in this category, in other words, a pregnant woman, must be allowed 30 minutes twice a day to nurse her baby during work hours. Let me make you laugh. And this one, I'm not going to ask my sister, and congratulations on your baby. I owe her a small gift. Okay. So, most women too at work don't take 30 minutes twice a day. They take 1 hour. What do they do? Either they will be coming later to work by 1 hour or be closing earlier by 1 hour. They manufacture that. That's not what the labor law says. However, that is also very convenient. Okay, this is regulations of young persons employment sections 59, 60, 61, 62. I won't really dwell on that. Recruiters and incident matters section 23 to 43. Prohibition of forced labor section 73 says that, and listen to this fine, you will laugh. Even me, I can vex and pay the fine. The act established the constitutional provision of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria against forced labor and placed a punitive measure of 1,000 naira or 2-year imprisonment or both upon any culprit. I can see the hand of gift abobo raised. If it is intentional, please, you have the floor. you have my consent to please share your opinion or ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So someone asked a question earlier on regarding this. Sorry, good evening, everyone. Someone has a question earlier on regarding this maternity leave, talking about confirmed and unconfirmed staff. So I'd had several issues where, you know, my director, he will tell you this person is not confirmed, he's not supposed to, she's not supposed to go for 3 months, and this, that. I'm like, it's statutory. Whether the person is confirmed or is not confirmed, the person should proceed. And I see that most organizations, you know, also have this issue of not wanting their confirmed staff to go for 3 months. And sometimes when they allow the person go, the payment becomes an issue. They don't even want to pay up to that 50%. Some will tell you 25% just because the lady is confirmed. I want you to, you know, throw more light on that.
Okay, thank you so much. The truth is, gift is that in the context of the labor law, there is no light to throw. It is a function of legality or illegality. Okay, the truth is the labor law is clear when it comes to criteria to go on maternity. It has nothing to do with confirmation or non-confirmation. Just like it has nothing to do with whether you are married, single, or in between. Okay, it also has absolutely nothing to do with when you joined the organization. So some organizations have it written or unwritten. They will say you must have done 2 years, you must have done 1 year before you can go on maternity. I put it to you, men and brethren, that practice is illegal, is unconstitutional, is unfair labor practice, and should not be tolerated, should not be condoned anywhere. And anything short of 50% is against the law, should not be tolerated, and should be challenged by all HR practitioners and all professionals of good faith. Now, let me say this at this juncture, that we are somewhat very fortunate here that Nigerians are not generally very litigant by nature. By the word litigant, I mean Nigerians are not quick to go to court. Maybe one of the reasons is because the judicial process somewhat appears slow and takes time, and people will say, oh, do I have the time to go the long haul? Let me take you across the border. Just go to a country like Ghana. The ease at which people go to court, it will shock you. Let me also say this. I have a friend, she has been practicing HR, human resource management in Canada now for like 15 years. Her name is Tolu. Tolu told me that when she was in Nigeria, employees used to fear HR, that the first professional shock she got, the first adjustment she had to make when she got to Canada as a practicing HR professional was that she now started becoming afraid of the employees. I don't know if I'm making sense. Do you know why? Your staff will take you to court and you will both be working and you will both be attending court, and you cannot victimize her based on the outcome of the court. Okay, so the law is clear, both from the international perspective and dimensions and from the local dimensions. And the truth is, what makes HR a profession, what makes us as individual professional is sticking to our guns, even at the risk of our jobs. Because if it is the right thing to do, if it is the fair thing to do, if it is the proper thing to do, it should be done. If more and more HR professionals resign from their job because their management is insisting they do an unfair labor practice, we will get better adjustment from employers, especially one-man businesses in general. I hope I've been able to provide some feedback to you. I think we have one or two other questions or comments. If you also want to contribute to this conversation, feel free, please. The floor is open, please.
Hello, sir. It's not really like a contribution. It's just a quick question. The world is changing now. We have women who have fertility issues, who have to probably look for other ways of, getting pregnant. Let's say surrogacy. I have a friend who did that. and she had the baby now. So I'm wondering, for someone like that, that did not carry the child physically, and now has the baby, is it okay if she makes a request for maternity leave, seeing that she has a baby already and she wants to go and cater to at home? How is that going to work if that kind of thing happens in my organization?
Okay, good. This is a very good question. Now, the labor law as presently constituted in Nigeria does not make provision for surrogacy leave. However, good HR practice and what is happening obtainable in other climes, because we also borrow HR and good practice from any source globally. Okay, now, many organizations in Nigeria today have 2 months surrogacy leave or adoption leave. And I've worked in 2-3 places that have done that. Now, what they don't do is they don't give you 3 months, because they will say it's not as if you went through the period of pregnancy and childbirth, stress, trauma, everything. They now give you 2 months. So some organizations call it adoption leave, 2 months. Some organizations call it surrogacy leave. Because let's think about it. This is an infant or a toddler, depending on how young this person is. You want to have a concentrated few days or weeks for bonding. Okay, and don't forget that for a woman, a female employee who has been trusting God for the fruit of the womb, maybe for a while, don't forget that if you are not careful, except they are super strong, their productivity on the job may be affected. So they are now trying to do a workaround. So as an organization, you should show that you are supportive of the women gender. Okay, now, if you can't do 2 months, can you do 6 weeks? Can you do 1 month? But make a case. Also try and identify some of these international and local companies doing these things and substantiate it and make a case, make a push for it. For me, it is very good practice. The good thing is, it's not as if the person will be adopting a child every six months. No, not at all. People who adopt generally don't end up adopting more than maybe 2 or 3 at the maximum. Okay. More questions, feedback, please.
So we've got quite a bit of questions, but just before I read some of them, I just wanted to touch on the surrogacy bit. I think generally, even international practices, you find that it is so HR is really driven by a lot of principles, right? Thinking about why exactly do we give women maternity leave? And so it's the same thinking of why exactly would the woman want leave, even if it's surrogacy. Remember, it is her egg and her husband's whatever that they've put together to come up with the baby. It is an infant, like literally the surrogate delivers the baby and hands it over to you right away. It doesn't make you need less time with the baby because you did not carry the baby, right? So those are the kinds of thoughts we should be having when engaging leaders or managers in terms of what is the need for a maternity leave. It is to spend time with your child. The fact that you didn't carry it doesn't make you not the mother of the child. So I think for me, that's an important way to think about some of these things that we're doing. So let me just move into some of the questions that we've got. And one says that, what is the standard or practice for queries, giving queries or a grievance procedure? What should the standard practice be?
Okay, so let me just say this at this juncture, that generally there is what we call procedural justice, and there's what we call distributive justice. Okay, procedural justice is, due process, gradual, scalable. Okay, and then distributive justice has to do with equity, fairness, consistency. So a lot of things we do in the HR administrative space, and by this I mean the grievance space, is not out of context. We also mirror the judicial system, the legal system. So if you look at the judicial or legal system, you will see that there is what we call magistrate court. There may be high court, maybe state court, appeal court, Supreme Court. In other words, like Opemikwo contributed articulately and rightly, in other words, there are levels. So looking at this spirit, and I want you to understand this thing. Similarly, because I can't just tell you that this is the way you should do your grievance. It will slightly differ from company A to company B. But again, you have to have it from a very simple to a complex way. What do I mean? Something as simple as, so you should generally have categorization of offenses. In other words, there are some cases that you may not be able to go to a magistrate court. Take maybe a murder case. They may say, no, it starts directly from a certain kind of court. Why? Because it has been categorized. But maybe two fighting, maybe I'm going on the road and I slap my gate man. Now, what am I saying? So you should have maybe minor misdemeanor, major or gross misdemeanor. You should have that. So for example, maybe things like lateness, maybe insubordination can be in a pool or in a category. And then things like maybe harassment, sexual harassment, theft, fraud, falsification of documents can be in another pool. So that's the first thing. Then there is a process, generally speaking, that you should follow. Now, generally speaking, issuing of a query. And a query is not necessarily a bad thing. A query is just another word for saying, explain your side of the story. Simple. So I can give you a query and you respond to the query and the matter ends there. That doesn't affect your career in any way, because a query in itself is a request for explanation. Now, if after review of the response to the query, it may now go to another level, which may be a disciplinary panel. The disciplinary panel too must be well set up, diversified, with representative from the required departments, and subject matter experts. And you should be able to, you must give your employee fair hearing. So this is very critical, fair hearing. So if they say they have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 witnesses, let them bring them to the panel. Sometimes they may want to come with representatives so that they have some comfort of fair hearing. So these are some of the things. Now, also very importantly, that your grievance procedure, that your disciplinary process, as much as possible, make sure it is documented, written, so that it is visible to all and nobody can easily, intentionally misapply it. Okay, so document it. Typically, it may be part of the conditions of service or collective bargaining agreement or employee handbook. So in organizations that are employee relations led, non-unionized, you will have what you call employee handbook. In other organizations, it typically will be maybe the CBA or the COS. So the step-by-step process, issue a query, respond to a query, and then the timelines. How many days, maybe 24 hours to write a query. So you can't issue a query now and say, in 5 minutes, respond to the query. Is that reasonable? Is that fair? Okay, so also make sure that when you craft and draft these things, as much as possible, like I mentioned earlier in this conversation, run it through your legal department, run it through the retainership, so that they also provide guidance to ensure that what you are doing is not out of sync with global best practice and is not out of tune with the legal framework in the country. Let me just keep it at that so that I can take a few more questions. Again, we are ending this program by 9 p.m. So please bear with us.
Okay, there's a question that says that, so you talked about different notice periods, right? Based on years. So people have asked in different ways to say the organization asked for 3 months notice or payment in lieu. Is that correct? They've asked for 1 month, 3 months. Is that in alignment with the labor law?
So the labor law makes provision that organizations and employees can agree in a contract their notice of disengagement. Once you sign, it is correct. In other words, it is also a negotiable element in when you get an offer letter. If they give you 2 months, for example, and you think it's not fair, you can negotiate for 1 month. And you can take a walk if it's a deal breaker for you. Don't forget that the notice period is not unilateral. It means even if the organization are the one letting you go, they too will give you 2 or 3 months. Typically, what happens is that the most senior you go in your career, maybe you're a management staff, they may say 2 months or 3 months. Then certain industries, let me just mention one key industry, consulting generally do 3 months notice. And it is not because they are trying to be unreasonable or unbearable. It is because they are a projectized environment working for clients. So they don't want to start a project with the competence of certain personnel, and then arbitrarily, they'll just give the client 1 month notice. It may collapse the sustainability of whatever program they are trying to deploy. In other words, they too, typically in that industry, will not arbitrarily let you go. They will also give you the same 3 months. But organizations that sometimes have some of these seemingly extreme measures also have some benefits. Some of them, for example, the average consulting firm, if you leave them on a good note, you can always come back. Their rate of return absorption is higher than any other sector. Okay, so sometimes it's also good. Don't just take one factor in isolation. There may be complementary benefits that goes with it. But if you are not comfortable, please don't take the offer letter. Take a walk and stay to where maybe they'll give you 2 weeks or 1 month or whatever you are comfortable with. Okay, next question, please.
Okay, so I'll give you 2 questions at the same time so you can just address. So the first one is, can we suspend without pay? So a number of organizations suspend people and then they don't pay them for that period. That's one. And the second one is, does the Labor Act address having insurance for staff, like group life insurance? Some companies do have group life insurance. So is that in the Labor Act, or just companies doing that on their own?
So there are, the labor law is not the only law, like I mentioned. So there are other laws. Okay, for example, there is Payee Act, there is Pension Act. Okay, there's Factories Act, there's NSITF. So while at the top of my head, it doesn't particularly stipulate in the labor law, but I am very sure that there are other laws, either for the organization, that stipulates this insurance class for employees. So it's part of the laws, but it's not in the labor law specifically, to the best of my knowledge. But it's in some other laws. Okay?
What about the suspension without pay?
Okay. Can I quickly contribute to that part?
Okay, please go ahead, please.
Okay, good evening, House. I think it's in the PENCOM Act. So it's a requirement that for you to get your PENCOM plan, group life insurance, you have to present the certificate. Only then will you get your PENCOM compliance certificate, and it's a requirement, it's a tax requirement. So
Okay.
just to clarify that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Kasali, for that valuable contributions. Opemipo, I'm with you.
I was saying that you didn't respond to the one about suspension without pay. Can we suspend without pay?
Okay, so now, that's a touchy issue. A touchy issue. So if you have to suspend without pay, one, is it contained in your conditions of service or employee handbook? This is very important. It must, provisions must have been made for that in your employee handbook that the employee had already signed, or the condition of service or the collective bargaining agreement. Not that the MD will just say suspend Oluyemi for 2 weeks without pay. That is arbitrary and will be null and void. Okay, that is one. Another note around this same subject matter is that also you shouldn't just suspend indefinitely. When you are suspending, it should be specific and for a purpose. And typically, that purpose should be around, maybe there is need for investigation and the continuous presence of that employee in the organization will hamper the successful investigation, or maybe the person can interfere. So maybe you suspend maybe 1 week, 2 weeks. If you now need to extend the suspension, you come again, but not that you just suspend. So for example, there's nothing called indefinite suspension. There's nothing like that. If you suspend somebody indefinitely, 5 years later, the person will go to court and the court will make you pay, because when the staff is on suspension, they've not been sacked. Note, which means that they cannot go to another organization to go and get employment or work. They're supposed to survive. Don't also forget about the international practices I mentioned earlier around pay. Okay, so if you must suspend, if you must, make sure that it's in line with your documented policy. 2, make it short, the purpose, and quickly do the investigation and come out of it and close the matter. Please avoid the one that is longer than 1 month, is indefinite, because it must be feasible that the time you're asking for the investigation is reasonable, is fair, that neutral people, if they look at the context and circumstances, we agree with you that, okay, a 2-week suspension is not out of place. Okay, it shouldn't be at the whims and caprices of His Excellency, the Managing Director. Thank you.
Okay, just following on that, someone says that, does the labor law support using leave days to offset resignation notice, since leave days is paid for at the point of exit? So when you want to exit the organization, the leave days that you've accrued at the time, they pay you off for that. So can you use your leave days to offset notice period?
So the labor law does not speak to this matter. So it's not about whether it supports it or is against it. So I can tell you that the labor law does not support it, but I can't also tell you that the labor law is against it. What we work here is what is the contractual agreement between the employee and the employer. Okay, so if it is stated that give notice or pay in lieu of notice, or give notice or use leave days in lieu of notice, okay, but if you look at the general principle of leave, you are not supposed to use it. You are supposed to use your leave as leave. In the general sense of leave, you are leave, the purpose of leave is for leave and nothing else. Okay, but if it is documented between the organization and the employee that you can use your leave days, but don't forget that as an employee, you can resign with immediate effect. The only thing is maybe you may need to pay in lieu of notice. But if it is okay by organization, but I won't recommend it. Okay, it's better you give notice or pay in lieu of notice. But if there is a clause that in lieu of notice you can use leave, if it is documented, no problem. Note, if it is documented, no problem.
Okay, we spoke about queries, and you said query is just a question, right? But
yes,
someone is saying
just
that,
a question.
Okay, so how about organizations where they say when you've got 2 queries on your file, the employee will be terminated? So how do we manage that?
So I understand that, but let me state this: it is not well captured. Okay, a query itself. Look, let me say this: I can be querying my colleague every day. In fact, I probably query some of them every day. Do you know why? A query is, oh, why is there a delay in this? Why have you not done that? So a query is not when you write query as the subject of the letter. No. What is the problem is, what is the response to the query? Now, there should be a review, even if it is 2 or 5 minutes, of that response. If the response is satisfactory, then no offense has been committed. Okay? So it is only that query is not satisfactory, and that is why typically it's advisable it goes to a disciplinary committee. It can be a 2 or 3 or 4 man committee to review objectively. Why? You don't want it that is the officer that is offended that is determining the gratitude of the sanction, or that is judging that it is you are guilty or not. Let that neutral 2 or 3 man committee say, we've reviewed the query and the response and the verbal testimony of the complainant and the respondent and we determine that an infraction has been committed, and the sanction here is first written warning or a verbal caution. So it will not be appropriate if you say, if you have a verbal caution or a first written warning or two verbal caution or two first written warning or two final written warning, you will be terminated. That is what it means. The query itself is not an offense. My oga can be querying me every day. That's not a problem. Okay, the query is not the indictment. So we may need to change how we couch it. Okay, I think we can only take one or two more questions so that Kwemiko can do the rounding up formalities.
Okay, so just a comment from Kolawole Nasir, who spoke earlier. So he says that group life insurance is a statutory requirement based on the PENCOM Act. So I think we can look at that for more clarification if we want later. I think the last question on this is around maternity leave. So someone says that, how do we handle women who give birth yearly, right? So I think in this person's organization, maybe they have experience of people giving birth on a yearly basis, and the organization cannot afford that, right? So how do you, so they then created a policy that says that maternity leave with pay is every 18 or 24 months. So is that in alignment with the Labor Act to define for someone when they go on maternity leave?
I'll be very down to earth with you. That rule or that policy is null and void. It's against the fundamental human right of women. A woman, irrespective of their marital status, has the right to be as pregnant as frequently as they choose. This is a fundamental human right, which is superior to an organization perspective. Now, on the other hand, on a medical ground, we can advise the woman or the lady about the benefit of child spacing, but it is not within the space of the HR practitioner or the organization to say, oh, woman is only every 2 years. That is an abuse of authority and abuse of power. And if it is challenged in the court, the company will be sanctioned. Okay. So maybe you just improve your recruitment process. You know, there is a way you will ask some questions politely. You'll be able to know if somebody is very career driven or the person wants to be having children every year and have 10, without asking them that what is your procreation plan. Please don't ask that kind of question. That will be discriminatory. But there is a way you will know that this person is career focused, and even for their own career growth, they won't have a child this year and then, except by some divine intervention, intermediation. It's not as if child birthing is also convenient. It's not a romantic activity. You understand what I mean? There are some pressure sacrifices associated with this. And it also shows that when you have the right mix of gender and age in your organization, it's not as if everybody is within a particular age bracket and everybody is within a gender. So once you diversify your organization, generally speaking, you'll be able to balance any one or two excesses from either side of the divide. Thank you.
Okay, I'm afraid we're unable to take any more questions at this time. Thank you so much for your time. It was really a pleasure to have you guys on the call this week. We will share the recording, as said earlier. Just like this session we've had today, we have a number of sessions planned out for the next couple of weeks over the month and within the next month as well. So we have one around emotional and political intelligence for HR, and that's on the 16th of April. The details will be shared in terms of the link closer to the time. We've also got consulting skills for HR professionals, and we've got the speaker there, Tinuke, and that's on the 25th of April, closer to the time as well. You will get the Zoom details to join that session. We've also got a session around HR business partnering, and that's scheduled for the 7th of May, and that's by Peju, same time, 7 to 9 p.m. And closer to the time as well, you will get details around that. So I do hope that you've had a very useful time here today. Very many thanks to our speaker, Yemi, for a very insightful session. That was really powerful. I think we've got a lot of testament to that on the group chat. So he's already flashed his details. Please connect with him, Toles Niger on Twitter, Facebook. His number has been displayed as well. So please connect with him. He's happy to connect with everyone. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. and the Easter break. So Yemi, any last words from you before we go?
I'd like to thank everyone. The conversation continues at our various groups. Let's ask our questions. Our leaders on the platform will assist us, and you can reach out to me privately. I'll also respond. I've also benefited from preparing for this. I also like to recognize my colleagues and friends and HR leaders from the HR community of the Covenant Nation. And also I can see members from CIPM, HRCI, SHRM, and I can also see some of my colleagues at my workplace. I feel highly honored. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Sorry, Yemi, can you quickly share that slide about your details again? People want to know how they can connect with you.
Okay, I'm doing that right away.
Yes, so thank you so much, Yemi. That's been a really, really useful session, and looking forward to connect with you. And I'm sure everyone else on the call is looking forward to that. So these are the details. Please feel free to just take a screenshot with your phone so you can connect with him. The meeting is just right on the top of the hour. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much, Yemi, again, and have a great evening and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
All right, bye. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Oluyemi. Thank you, Femiko.
Oluyemi, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. Hey, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, bending every heart. I worship you. I worship you. We make miracle walking, promise keeper, light in the darkness. That is who you are. We make miracle walking, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You wipe away all tears. You mend the broken heart. You're the answer to it all. Jesus, you wipe away all tears. You mend the broken heart. You're the answer to it all, to it all. worship you. You are here, meeting every need. I worship you. I worship you. Oh,